hope that many of you came into this course and are leaving this course with a sense of expanding your story capacity. I really view story work as a work of becoming, because a work of becoming is unfinished, right? And if we can transmute the overwhelm into this incredible possibility and sense of adventure, it becomes quite enjoyable and sustainable. But there are a few things that we can practice and devote ourselves to continue expanding our capacity to channel story so that it gets easier and it feels less overwhelming over time. This is a little bit of review over our entire course and maybe just a reorganization of some of the information that we've already covered. So here are different ways that we have learned to expand our capacity. We start by nurturing our nervous system, right? We talked about disrupting the nerve-wracking narratives. We kind of teased out the difference between narratives versus story. We talked about the experience of having sort of those narratives that just run on repeat and we can just spiral into, and they feel really draining. So we've learned to disrupt them. We disrupt them with our somatic practices. We disrupt them with very intentional reflection. All of the exercises that you've been given in this course work to disrupt those autopilot narratives that aren't serving us, and then give us an opportunity, just that first breath, that pause, to then practice stewardship. And all of the stewardship that you've learned in this course moves you towards deeper self-trust. In that self-trust, we are cultivating our power, which I presented to you as tapping into your power is a form of taking responsibility for your humanity, for your gifts, for your service. And cultivating power is not as like mysterious and intangible as you might think. It can simply be through practicing creativity, which is why some of your early homework assignments were to create something, through movement, which is why I gave you so many somatic practices in this course, and then through service, channeling, right? As we witness ourselves channeling our wisdom and our service to others, we position ourselves to feel that flow of power. Yeah, okay. So our nervous system, as we practice these things, begins to be less and less depleted and more replenished. And as we do that over time, we are actually rebuilding our internal story architecture. And there's a few more practices that help us do this more intentionally. So the first one is choosing and refusing stories. You want to be choosing stories that nourish us. And in our last session, or maybe it was our Q&A, we even touched on the nuance of this. So I think we've touched on this in a larger sense about, like, you know, we want to refuse stories of the dominant status quo that limit us, that intentionally attack our humanity, that dehumanize us. Those are pretty clear. We want to choose stories that are humanizing, that are refreshing and loving. But in our last Q&A, we even talked about the nuance of this, that there might be stories that served you at a point in time that then you begin to outgrow. And so as we expand our agency and we allow our agency to be tied to deeper and deeper discretion, we are going to be choosing more and more nuanced layers of stories that meet us in the present moment that we're in and fill our needs. Okay. As we are expanding our agency and choosing and refusing our stories, our values become more and more clear. And then we begin to weave stories around our values, both the stories that we tell and the stories that we consume. So the values become kind of the pillars that hold up our entire story architecture, and we get clearer and clearer on our values as we go through this process. And our values shift over time too, right? Our environments and our roles, our becoming will inform the shifting and the evolving of our values, but most of them will remain the same over time. And then with all of this, we're rooting into better collective paradigm. So we are choosing which, constellations of stories and belief systems that we are rooting into. And this, again, it can be dynamic, it can be nuanced, it can evolve over time. But generally, as we move, we're going to go deeper and deeper into certain paradigms that will evolve with us, that will hold us for the rest of our human journey. Okay. And then a few more here. Some of you have told stories and shared experiences of the blocks that you came into this course with, and you probably will still experience blocks. I do, right? It's being human. But I hope what you've tapped into is the possibility of transmuting each of those blocks every time you face them, right? And we can transmute those blocks into guidance, into something that actually serves us. I really love to reframe every block as something that was intended to be a helpful message if we just paid attention to it, right? So for example, if you've had a resistance to posting, to sharing, to being perceived, right? Maybe that resistance is a deeper message from our nervous system that we just need to tune into and apply our wise discretion. Maybe it's telling us to slow down. Maybe it's asking us to go back to our story, our sacred story flow model, and saying who, what, where, when, why. Maybe we've been forcing a story into a place that it's not supposed to be, in a form that it's not supposed to be. But if we tune in, it will actually let us know and reveal to us where it's supposed to flow. And then we'll have that open door to share our stories, right? We can also transmute any need for validation. I want to soften this criticism about like needing to be validated. For sure, a need for validation can be a huge block and hindrance to us, but I want to kind of soften the criticism of it and transmute it into this consideration of, as sensitive people, we care so much about those that we interact with. So of course we seek affirmation that what we are doing and how we are in their presence lands in a safe, nourishing, positive way. This doesn't need to be validation that makes or breaks us, right? And we get to transmute that by devoting ourselves to our values, our vision, our roles and responsibilities, and being held by all of those things so that we can build that self-trust and not need it to be externally validated, but then also be very compassionate with ourselves and say, as a sensitive person, I'm checking in with my environments. I'm checking in with those I'm connected to, and making sure that my values and my vision and my roles and responsibilities are landing as intended. Yeah. And then we can transmute this fear of being perceived into trusting that we are holding what's asking to be sacred in our sacred space. And then really trusting that whatever we are going to share is our dynamic sharing, right? Of our sacred gifts, our embodied wisdom. So any fear of being perceived, you just have that self-talk and are able to say, yeah, anything that's not meant to be perceived, I got this. I'm holding it where it needs to be held. And anything that I give generously is a generous gift. And those who are it's meant for will be able to receive it. Okay. And as you practice all of this, you've heard me say this before, it's just another reminder, I want you to gather the evidence. This is what really rewires our nervous system. I don't really love that phrase, rewires our nervous system, but it does. It changes our patterns, right? And so by gathering the evidence, by practicing the noticing, naming, and reflecting of moments, just like you've done when we started this class today, and so many other times in this course, noticing the shifts, noticing the change, noticing what you're proud of, what challenges you've gone through, and then sharing the stories of the evidence with others, it gives our brain something to hang on to. It makes it easier for our brain when it's searching through sort of like the file cabinets of our lived experience to say, hey, I tried this before and it was a really positive experience. I can trust myself, right? And another way to continue gathering the evidence is by staying and serving in story communities and story friendships, because just positioning ourselves in those collective spaces will allow us to have opportunities to live the evidence and then reflect back the evidence.